why do you need adversity to be great? Say hello to my wife. I'm having what's known as a wardrobe malfunction. She is cutting my hair. This has been a dream of hers.
You can endear me to your millions of viewers.
To humiliate me on the air.
I always cry even though it isn't allowed. So proud.
You make me want to be a better screamer.
A better screamer.
No, definitely not that. Do you need adversity to be great?
Your skill is you tee up your guests and you make them look, so good.
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Gets me all fired up, man. Such a good interviewer. I'm ready to go. Jump to the screen. But no, it's so true.
They can't see I'm dancing by myself.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.
I love it. I laugh at that opening every single time. Hello, everybody. Welcome to CoronaTV. The opening that you saw is a combination of some of the things that excites me about the opportunity to grow this platform, this brand, and this conversation and relationship that I have with you guys. It's art. Every time I write, every time I speak, every time I create, this is my art. And I love experimenting, and I love putting myself out there, and I love the fact that I can have someone performing live on the air, and I can get my hair cut live on the air. This is the beauty of digital. This is the beauty of the opportunity to explore and realize that there is no precedent when it comes to creativity. And my guest today, I would consider him to be family. He has been with CoronaTV since the beginning. Every day we have our Zoom after show, post show, after party, and he's there as one of the few people that's there every single day. And when he's not there, he apologizes. He sends me a note explaining why he's not going to be there, and I get pissed off if in fact he's not there and he hasn't told me why he wasn't going to be there. And I'm going to try and sabotage him as much as I can, including bringing him on right now, which you didn't know. Joey Dumont, you are my co-host. You're doing the whole show with me right now, from beginning to end. Yeah, you didn't expect that.
I did not, but that's okay. I can roll.
That's why I said to you, just be ready to go from the beginning. So Chrissy Cornelia said hi to you. Hi, I always ask when I see new people.
Hey, Dennis.
You know Dennis?
Yeah.
Frankfurt in the house, and of course we both know Crystal.
Yes.
She pops in
I
from
met her
Crystal.
Here on CoronaTV. I met her. Wonderful.
Crystal, we need you back in the Zoom room.
Yes.
There's going to be a hell of a party in the Zoom room today because we've got an ex-guest, Jason Burnham. Jason's going to be with us. We're going to hang out and just talk about whatever we want to talk about. We're going to talk about you, Joey. It's all about you today. Which is my
favorite subject, so I'll be very happy to do so.
I know you're already acting like a douchebag, says Bob Farman.
Thank you, Bob.
And awesome, Tamara's here as well.
Hi, Tamara.
That's awesome, isn't it great? Well, Crystal
I love the whole crew.
Oh,
Mr. Aarons.
Yeah, Mr. Aarons, do we call him? So it's good to see lots of shout outs to people. This is family, right? This is about community. Yeah. This is about connection. This is about relationships. And it's also, I guess, Joey, it's about vulnerability, being an atypical man these days, right? Or maybe that's changed for a while. And I'm just gonna keep on putting people up, and there's Roxy saying hello to you, and Michelle is there as well. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun today, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. So Joey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well.
I am your first. I'm your virgin interview. You never forget.
You are. You're my first interview for my memoir. So I appreciate you being so generous to put me on the show.
So I heard a vicious rumor. Maybe you can confirm that you wrote a book. Is that true?
I did.
I didn't know that. This is the first I know. I'm just kidding. I tease because I care. So look, you are my co-host today. which means you're going to present everything in the preamble which you know nothing about, and that's okay. So on behalf of Joey and I, we want to wish you a happy National Crouton Day. I mean, I love these. Who knew? It's actually, some days I cannot decide between which one is more absurd. It's not only National Crouton Day, it's actually National Frog Jumping Day as well.
Jumping Day.
So if you guys have got a frog, let the frog jump and jump for joy, and we celebrate you. We also celebrate you, Mr. Dumont. You are my guest. You wrote a book called Dirty Words, The Diary of a Recovering Douchebag. And I guess we will all decide at the end of this interview whether, in fact, you have recovered or you still have a little bit of douche left inside you. I
think the operative word is recovering. So it's not past tense because I'm still in the process of becoming a better human. It's taken a while, but I'm getting
Well, from what I've seen from the time we've reconnected, your recovery is almost complete. So some birthdays today. Pick out your favorites. Mr. Steve Amsdorf, he was my economics teacher back in South Africa, and a special birthday to my buddy Raymond Goss, who's actually going to be on the show on Sunday, I believe. Raymond is 49 today. Raymond did this beautiful Zoom experiment. I think he called it Project 2020. He went and interviewed 20 entrepreneurs and innovators about insights, obviously with a hindsight 2020. One of them was myself, with full disclosure. And I asked him to come onto the show and share some of his insights. What were the highlights, the surprises about interviewing these 20 entrepreneurs and innovators? And of course, also happy birthday to all of my LinkedIn friends and some of my closest strangers on LinkedIn as well. I want to say happy birthday to you guys. Well, Joey, today's, I think Jan called it the other day, he called it a seated monologue. Today's seated monologue is about fate. And I think it's very appropriate for you and I, because, when we think about this idea of fate, of life being determined for us, of not being able to have any say or decision in terms of what happens to us. So I was thinking, on a personal basis. And by the way, all the iMedia people behind me are with me on this topic as well. I was thinking, I was in South Africa when basically the lockdown or the quarantine began. And as you know, and many people know, my wife got the coronavirus, and a huge chunk of my Connecticut family got it as well. And I was spared. And I thought to myself, I missed it. And I came back to health. And I never got the virus, even though I was in the same house with my wife. And I thought to myself, was it meant to be? Was it meant to be that at the end of the day, I would not get the virus? Maybe it would have meant, God forbid, that I would have got really sick. And I think to myself now, with this frustration, Joey, that we have with respect to this, I just want to go out. Part of me, not defy social distancing, but part of me just wants to get it, wants to just find someone with the virus and hug him and kiss him and, and get it over and done with. But then I think to myself, am I cheating fate? Am I playing with money that's not mine? And I think it's a tough battle that we're all going through right now, which is, figuring out what's meant to happen to us. Will we get the virus? Will we be asymptomatic? Will we get sick? How do we, in fact, influence our own fate? What do you think?
I don't want it. So let's just be clear. I don't want it. I don't want it in my house. We live in a 1,500 square foot apartment in San Francisco. I have two little dudes. That would freak me out. I mean, we could quarantine one of our bedrooms, but yeah, that whole thing scares me. There's just too much unknown about it. So we're doing what we can. And again, we're fortunate. So we both work from home, and our kids are actually online right now in their classes. So it's tenable for us. I mean, it's not, there's a lot of people out there suffering. We're not one of them, fortunately. So
yeah, they might. Hopefully, they can make a little debut on the show as well. But yeah, I mean, this is, and you know this because you've been a part of Corona TV since the beginning. we go through these struggles and the tension about, do we stay inside, do we go outside, do we get sick, don't we get sick, the highs are super high, the lows are super low, this manic depressive existence, trying to reconcile whether we're grateful to not be sick or whether to complain or to be frustrated about our lack of revenue. These are tough times and tough decisions. And just to go back to this idea, as I was doing a little bit of digging and looking for some visual aids, I saw that there's indeed a difference between fate and destiny. And I found a couple of quotes. Shavasti, and I did a little bit of research. I think Sia Healer said, fate is a given, destiny is what we do with it. And here's another way to think about it. Sadhguru, an Indian yogi and author, said, destiny is what you create for yourself. Fate is when you fail to create your own destiny. And I just thought to myself, and that's why I wanted to share it with you today and see your thoughts. Think about your life. Think about your memoir. Think about your diary. Think about all the things that have happened to you. Surely everything that happened, the good and the bad, happened for a reason. Or do you not look at it that way?
I do. I think that specifically the reason that I even wrote the book was because of perceived failure. So after a pretty wonderful career in advertising, I jumped out of that industry and went in to run startups as a chief revenue officer. And I went to a couple startups, and you spend most of your time with investor pitches and pro formas and doing all this different stuff. And both companies ran out of money over a period of years. And I just sat down with my wife and I said, babe, I got to understand what I'm doing with all this failure. And I need to kind of figure things out. And I said, I want to write this memoir. I've always wanted to write about my huge ego. I didn't exactly know the title or what I was going to get into, but I did want to write about myself and kind of learning how to deal with my own insecurities. And then I said, I'm going to write this. I'll be done in a year. And that was 3 years ago. So we didn't really have a conversation about it, but failure was the reason, or perceived failure was the reason that I actually did it. And then as I started to dive into writing, I would sit down and just think about what was the most insecure thing I felt that year. And then I'd write about it. And so you just start banging out stuff. And a lot of it, I actually never made the actual book, but The Cutting Room Floor was full of thousands of pages of my insecurities. And then the stories that actually rose to the top were the ones that were most painful. And obviously you read some of the book. The hope was to do it through a self-deprecating lens of humor and self-criticism and self-deprecation, because it's not, some of these topics like depression and anxiety, my little brother's death, things like that were pretty dark. So I wanted to make sure I didn't get too, cerebral, I guess, or too melancholy. I wanted to.
No, but you saw the interview with Joe Delagrave, who was living the life as a college freshman, playing football, playing ball, and a freak boating accident renders him a paraplegic. And today he is a bronze medal winner as a Paralympian, wheelchair rugby. And I asked him the question, which was, do you ever think about what happened as happening for a reason, or almost being a good thing, like this was meant to happen to you? And his response was amazing, not dissimilar to yours in terms of recognizing. And we were discussing this earlier. I didn't know this, but you met your wife through your career. Everything led you to meet your wife.
Yeah. We at the agency, Verizon was our first really large brand to commit to a large media budget, and that was in 2005. And we hired some really amazing talent locally, and then they recruited Debbie to come run part of the Verizon business, and we met there. We were friends and colleagues for a couple years before we actually got married, but that's a whole nother story. It was a happy Me Too moment.
I want to take you back a few more years, which is when we met. How did we meet? Talk a little bit about that interaction.
Probably about the same time. We just closed the Verizon business, and at that point, I started getting invited to these conferences, iMedia being one of them. and you were the keynote. And I don't know exactly where it was. I think it might have been Camelback. And I had never met you. So the ballroom was dark, and then the spotlight came on, and then you came flying in, singing some kind of Frank Sinatra tune, which I thought was hilarious. And that was the first and last keynote speaker I've seen that came in crooning before you jumped on stage. So that was awesome. And then again, and we hung out for years. You took my money playing poker at the after hours poker tournament. And then obviously we hung out for years, but then we hooked up at the iMedia event, which is the picture behind you, in New Orleans in February. And you're like, "What are you doing, Joey?" And I was like, "That's me. Yeah, right behind you. Same sweater, actually. That's kind of cool." And that's how we met. And then you started CoronaTV to get everybody. And we talked about this too. Your purpose of getting it going was for someone to have a place to go. And as I said earlier to our group, they say that you become the 5 people you hang around with the most. And as an extrovert who needs attention, I needed to go someplace every day and be with other people. And watching the show and watching people come through adversity, obviously the young man we just talked about, Delagrave, was an inspiring story and a really cool young guy. But yeah, that's how we met. So,
well, look, according to Chris, the after parties never happened. So it might just be in your mind. Although he does say what happens at iMedia stays at iMedia. And
thank God.
And our mutual friend Nick Johnson said, "Appreciate hearing the story of the book from Joseph. Good stuff." So let me clarify a couple of things. 3 things. Number one, I never keynoted at iMedia. It's always been a sore point, still to this day, that they've never given me an opportunity to keynote. I was the master of ceremonies.
Oh, that's right. You were the MC.
And
okay.
Number 2, this was the song, and I walked in and I sang, "Where have all the flowers gone? Long time passing."
Yeah.
Where have all the? And then I remember going up to, I think it was Tim Armstrong, and I said, "Where was he at the time? Google or AOL?"
Google.
And I guess I would have gone to Google, everyone. And I think I waited to like, when will they ever learn? And the third thing is so I met a pretty confident guy, a guy that people wanted to be around, a guy that wasn't afraid to paint his nails black and spiky gelled hair. And I would never, ever in a million years have imagined that there was any insecurity or fear behind that extroverted, overconfident demeanor.
Right.
And
well,
and yet there was.
I think that, and again, I can't talk to every narcissist, but I think that for me specifically, you mentioned the other day, you said, "Joe, I find you confident." And I would say now, as a 53-year-old man, I do feel confident, which I think is the sweet spot between arrogance and despair. And historically, I would ping pong in between the two. So if I was really feeling insecure, I would puff up, and throw the arrogant persona on because it was the way to protect me. And then good news, bad news, it works. So it's one of those things where if you are being arrogant and or funny or entertaining or holding court, as my wife says, that was kind of my way of overcoming my own insecurities. And there were a lot of them. And as you grow as a human being, you start to realize through some introspection that I really need to stop acting that way. And I think when you and I chatted about this earlier, the operative word in the book is recovering, because I still have moments where I feel really insecure. And when I do, I puff up. And my wife even gives me the little look, and she'll kind of just give me the dog tilt and Joey, and I'm like, "Yeah, no, you're right. I just kind of sorry." And so it's being self-aware now. I think that helps it. And I don't like going back and forth.
You have to tell your wife that I have also my little catchphrase for you, which is, "Joey, you're doing it again."
I'm going to mute you.
I'm going to have to mute you.
Yeah.
But I think this is even something that came out the other day, and it greatly benefited me, which is this. You and I were talking about it. Was talking too much, and not and what did we say? I think it was a beautiful. We were doing our little pre-call. Respecting the silence was the phrase.
Yeah.
You've got to respect and you've got to appreciate the silence. It's beautiful. Don't be afraid of the silence. And instead, what I find, even to this day, I do, especially when selling is I keep talking and talking and talking. And eventually what happens is you end up overselling and therefore almost sabotaging yourself by not knowing when to kind of pull back.
Yeah, I think the best salespeople, there's an old adage that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, act accordingly. And if you really get into the sales game, which I have obviously 30 years of experience in, the more you listen, the better off you are. And that's something that I think stands true in almost any aspect of your life. And I'm trying to get there. But if there's that uncomfortable silence, then I'm the first one to kind of chime in. And what I was scared of is, I've been kind of isolated in this shelter in place for the last 8 weeks. And now that I'm talking, I have to kind of I even kind of tried to sit back a little bit. so I wasn't jumping through the screen, because it's like, I get to talk. I get to see and talk to people. So it's nice to be on the show, even for that.
Today is all about you. You can say whatever the hell you want. People often ask the question to authors, which is, why do you write the book? And I think that, and by the way, it's interesting because I'm just looking at some of the comments. Amy said, confidence, fake it till you make it, baby. But then she also discussed this, what we were saying, which is, I'm not sure that holds for women. And, I think the one thing you've done in this book is you've demonstrated a certain fragility and a vulnerability about you and on behalf of all men. And I think that I think we're all battling. That's the point. Women are battling. Women continue to battle for their fair share and for their equal billing, deserved equal billing. And men are battling too, because I don't know that men know what their place is. Men have come from this cowboys don't cry world, and now kind of we're afraid to open our mouths because we don't want to put our foot in it. And that's generally because, as I often say, I take my one foot out my mouth to put the other one in. But it's hard, and I think we should acknowledge that we're all struggling. It doesn't matter who we are. Humans are struggling right now.
Right. Yeah, I originally wrote the book because one of my childhood friends was killed in a car accident, and his kids are 21 and 19, and his wife asked if I would write the eulogy. And I said, sure. And she said, make it Joey funny. I want the church to laugh. It's obviously a dark day. And I said, okay. And so I was in my home, my mom's house, next door to Jay, was the person who passed away. And I thought to myself, if I pass away, if I get killed in a car accident, my little buddies don't know who I am. They're just going to hear from you guys. Your dad was hilarious. He was, an ad executive. He loved your mommy. He was super funny, whatever it may be. But they wouldn't know, like, how I grew up feeling insecure. And my decades-long struggle with insecurity was something they have to know. And I want them to know at some point, whenever they read the book, that even their heroes can be vulnerable. And that's, I think, a big piece to what you're talking about with men, is that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's actually a sign of strength, because you're okay with yourself and you're kind of shedding that persona. For me, it was like a suit of armor, and it's heavy. To carry a persona around is heavy. And if you lose your job, or if you lose whatever it is that you identify with, who are you then? And in part of the book, I lost everything with my dad when he embezzled all my money. And I didn't know who I was. That was 30 years old. And that was the first time I didn't have anything to attach myself to. I was evicted from my home. I was 6 figures in debt. I had the betrayal of my father, all these different pieces and parts, and I didn't know who I was. And so I started looking at things other than material possessions, money, cars, job title, all of that. And I think that's a really big difference for men, because we do attach ourselves more, I think, to our career and our identity than women do. I don't want to say that. I did. And I think that that's a big piece of the narrative, is that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be scared. We're all scared, right? Especially now. If you look at what's going on, if you're not a little bit nervous or you're not uncertain about what's happening in this COVID time, then you're not being honest with yourself. And if you call up a buddy and say, hey, dude, how are you doing? Because I do that. I try to check in with my friends. And if they say, it's great, I'm like, is it? Are you great? And then they'll laugh and they'll say, no. And I'm like, all right, dude, I'm your boy. Let's talk. Like, what are you freaking out about? What's keeping you up at night? And they'll say, oh, dude, I'm scared about, I just got laid off and I'm the sole breadwinner. And all right, let's talk about that. And I think that was part of the onus of the book, was that if I can write a book making fun of myself and people read it and they're entertained by me making fun of myself, I can then laugh at myself, and then people, my buddies specifically, can laugh with me. And so the goal is kind of saying, hey, let's all laugh with each other instead of at each other, specifically now, because we're all scared. I mean, it's scary times out there. It's not uncertain. It's fucked up. And it's scary, and we need to kind of admit that.
You might have just cost me my my clean rating now.
Oh, you know what? I think my mom even said she wanted to watch, so I screwed that up too. Sorry, Mom.
And my mother-in-law now is my biggest fan. She's replacing you, Joey.
I was trying not to use that word.
Listen, this is all about being honest and keeping it real. And no one could or should be vilified for that. The book is called Dirty Words, The Diary of a Recovering Douchebag. And, you know, Joey, one of the things that is, you know, I'm only teasing you, right, about, I mean, I'm not saying swear all the time, but you got to be you. And there are no rules on Corona TV because, quite frankly, the only thing we need to worry about is getting the virus. But the vulnerability that I think we're feeling, so I just want to give you a different twist on it. I'm, as I have been, as I was streaming when I went for my test, as I was about the fact that my wife got sick, I'm trying to just be honest, and no walls, no opacity, and demonstrate. And I'm not trying to be overly vulnerable. I'm just trying to be honest. But here's the interesting thing. Tell me if you've seen this as well. You know very, very quickly in an instant when the person you're talking to cannot actually deal with that honesty. And he's still emotionally so stunted that they can't even relate to you. And it's like, dude, it's okay to say you've been laid off, because do you know how many tens of millions of Americans have been laid off too? It's okay. Who do you want to align yourself with more? The people in the same boat as you, or the people in the Hamptons right now complaining about the fact that, you know, their cook isn't there? I mean, it's time to take charge of our lives now.
Yeah, and I think take yourself less seriously. I think it really helps. I had a young woman who I didn't know. She was introduced to me from a fellow colleague, and she said she was having troubles interviewing. And this was pre-COVID. And so we sat down and talked over coffee one day, and she was so nervous. She was just sitting there and she was like vibrating. And I said, hey, I'm not interviewing you. And she smiled, and she was still so anxious. I said, just go like this, just shake. And so she did. And then she started laughing. And I said, all right, so what is your thing? What do you do? You know, do you exercise? Do you drink wine? Do you smoke weed? What is your thing? Well, how do you deal with anxiety? And she said, I don't do any of that. I said, do you eat? And she started smiling, and she said, yeah. And I said, me too. And I said, all right, so I'll start. Like, what's the most amount of food you shoved down your gullet in the last week? And she starts laughing. And I said, so last night, here's how much I ate. And I went through this just because I was eating emotionally for whatever reason at that point. And we were, within 10 minutes, she was laughing so hard. I stood up and I gave her a hug, and she hugged me back. And that was it. It's just all this energy released. And then we started talking about her very decorated resume and why she had issues with confidence. And it was like, that was a breakthrough. I came back and told my wife, I was like, Debbie, I just had the greatest conversation with the greatest young woman who was scared of her interviews. And she was a VP of sales for a very successful company, super smart, wonderful young woman. And she just couldn't get over the hump. And, you know, she sent me a note and said, thank you so much. That was so needed. And that's the kind of thing I think that the book can do, is that if people see, oh, okay, this guy who may appear confident has meltdowns just like everybody else, then because maybe I was being honest or vulnerable to her, she allowed that to come in with herself. And I think that was important.
If there's anything that we've learned from this period, it's the fact that every moment, every interaction, every breath that we have, an opportunity to interact with another human being. We're either building up or we're breaking down. We're either adding to something far more beautiful that hopefully will be around long after we leave, or we're creating something that has to be cleaned up by someone else. And I think there are so many emotions, hatred, anger, insecurity, all these, they're toxic. And I think you've battled you've battled them, and I feel like you've overcome a lot of these demons. It is a cathartic process, no doubt, to write a book. And by the way, you write really, really well.
Oh, thank you. I really, really like hearing that. So also let it be noted that my brother has been with me the last 2 years of this journey. I started the book by myself. The book wouldn't have been bad without my brother. It just wouldn't have been good. So I appreciate that, but I need to make sure that I let you know this has been a partnership, because if people think that I did this by myself, then I will suffer tons of anxiety about misrepresenting myself. But thank you. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you liked it.
I just want to say, for the record, the good parts of the book are definitely your brother. I'm sure of it.
Well, that's true. That's probably true.
Chris says empathy always wins, and Jan has requested, would you read a short bit from the book from us? Jan, I'm going to answer that on behalf of Joey, which is Joey in the Zoom room afterwards, bit.ly/CoronaTV after show. Why don't you read us an excerpt? I'm sure you will.
In the Zoom room. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Amy said, work keeps getting in the way of my Corona time. We'll catch the rest later. Thank you for the show. I'm buying your book. We made a sale, Joey. Do I get commission? I think Amy has absolutely shocked and stunned Joey that he froze. Joey, you froze. We made a sale. Why did you freeze up when you actually got some coin? I don't understand.
The screen froze.
I don't know. You know, this is also the warts and all of creating a show and a brand and a platform during this time of COVID. So, Joey, a couple of questions. I want to make sure we maximize our time in our little after party. Sure. You talk about being a recovering douchebag. Does that mean is there still a little bit of douche in you? Are you still a bit of a douchebag?
Well, here's an example. We went to I went to Rick Parkhill's brand storytelling conference, and I took my wife and boys, and we went to Park City, and it was this beautiful hotel. It was this way, but we got to the hotel room, and they put us in the worst room possible. And as you and I being consummate travelers and having all our points, and I'm used to being treated a certain way, and we had the tiny room, and there was construction up front. They actually had scaffolding up on our windows. So I called the front and I said, hey, is there any way we can get a different room? And she said, I'm sorry, Mr. Dumont, we're completely sold out. The conference is packed and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, that's not an acceptable answer. And I said, do me a favor and have your manager call me. And I hung up. And then the manager calls me, and I said, hey, Steve, just want to let you know, this room is untenable. I can't hear, I have my family here, blah, blah, blah. I said, Mr. Dumont, I'm really sorry. And I said, well, all right, whatever. I've been around enough to know this was not a very good room, but thank you. And I hung up. And then Debbie looks at me, and she's like, oh, babe. And I was like, oh, and it was immediate. It was just, and I could hardly breathe. And I said, oh, I got to go. And so I walked down to the lobby, and the young woman who actually was on the phone, I said, hi, I was just on the phone with some young woman and I was pitching about my room. She said, that was me. And I said, yeah, I'm the douchebag that was on the other end of the phone. And she just exploded. She just laughed. She's like, oh, thank you. You were fine. I've dealt with a lot worse today. And I said, yeah, but I acted like I was more important than other people. When I do that, I lose my breath. And so she's laughing. And I said, where's Steve? And so she pointed out Steve. He was at the front desk or at the front door. And so I walked over and said, hey, Steve, I'm the douchebag who just said it was unacceptable that my room wasn't as powerful as it should be or as nice as it should be because I'm really important. And he laughed his ass off too. So I needed to go and do that immediately because it was just, as soon as I think I'm better than somebody, it just recoils my whole anxiety. And so once I did that, then I was fine. And then I went back and I hugged my wife, and she said, good job.
But you know what?
It still happens.
Well, you also tell the story in the book. This is how I can prove to you that I did finally read the chapters that you sent me, and I loved it. I'm not just saying that, but you talk about the story when you were wall climbing or rock climbing, and you accidentally parked in a parking bay that belonged to a local dry cleaners, and you saw the owner of the dry cleaners tearing down on you, and I think you said in the past you would have just hit them or almost attacked them, even if not physically. But you disarmed them immediately and you said, oh, I'm sorry, that was my bad. I must have just, and he turned around and said, son or young man, go and enjoy your climb. And, you know, you said something, Joey, and I got to tell you that it's so, I can relate to what you said. There are moments, let's call them moments of weakness. And you immediately know that you've messed up. And then you feel gross, you feel disgusting. You'd be like, I just did that. And I think maybe that's the difference. The difference is it's the people that don't immediately register what they've done, that are maybe the narcissists that can't deal with, they don't even register that they've done something wrong. And I think the key advice that you've given is immediately just turn around and say, you know what, I messed up, my bad, and undo it.
As soon as you calm down. Yeah, the guy that came after me, and that was part of that chapter, that was my first depressionary episode, and that was after my dad stole all my money, and I didn't know what to do. So I went to Spirit Rock, which is a meditation center in Marin County, and I attempted to meditate, and I attempted to sit on these, you know, purple pillows with people wearing purple, and they were very sweet. But I just wasn't connecting with that at the time. I was really too into myself. And so what I found with rock climbing is that when you're on indoors or outdoors, you have to concentrate on what you're doing. You have to concentrate on the mountain. And if you don't, you fall off. And if you fall off, depending on where you are, you can really hurt yourself. So the neat thing about rock climbing for me was that it put me in a space where I was present. And when I was present on the wall, all of the crazy narrative that was running through my head just shut off. So it freed me from myself. It wasn't, and that was the really cool thing about it. And I had been doing that. I just got back from a week-long rock climbing trip outdoors with a bunch of really cool, crunchy people. I mean, we lived in vans, and, you know, we didn't do anything. There was no corporate talk. There was no money. No one knew what anybody else did for a living. We were just climbing walls on Half Dome, and it was awesome. And then I came back, and I threw my rope over my shoulder, and I'm walking, and this guy comes tearing ass out of his, because he had a sign, don't park here. And I was in a Range Rover, which didn't help. And so when I immediately saw him angry, I felt like, oh God, you know, I just peed on this guy. And you said the same thing. You can either make this guy's day better, or you can alleviate some of his anxiety. And at that moment, I was in a good space. I was present. I was happy. I was flat broke and 6 figures in debt, but I was at least in a good space in that moment. And when I said to him, oh man, I'm so sorry, I was just excited to get on the wall, I'll move right away. He realized right there that I was being authentic, that I wasn't scared, that I wasn't angry, that I was just being me. And it just deflated like a dying balloon. He didn't know what to do with it. And it was a really cool lesson for me. And that was 23 years ago. You know,
Joey, the key here is acceptance, and also coming, I think, to terms with the fact that we are who we are. We can't really change. We can be better. We can work at it. But at the end of the day, it's take me for who I am. Take me or leave me if, in fact, I am doing the best that I can. And acceptance, you know, I've been talking almost about, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of this, but I started off talking about endurance and patience as a superpower. And a couple days ago, I spoke about generosity as a superpower. But acceptance is another superpower. These are all going to be the new characteristics of, I think, what helps us get through this. Now, I wanted to just touch on a few little things from what I read that struck me, and just have you comment. And I will say briefly, only because I want to make sure that we have a lot of time together in the Zoom room. But you said when you are leading an outdoor pitch on a real mountain, your attention can only be one of two places: the wall or oblivion, the cliff or the coffin. And I thought it was really brilliantly written, but also this idea, you know, initially when I read it, I thought that the narcissist Joey just wanted the thrill and that almost to be, you know, on the verge of death to feel alive. But then I realized that this was part of your healing process. And it was that binary nature that itself became part of your spiritual path back, which is to recognize that you can. That's why I said fate and destiny. You can choose whether you want to go left or right. You can take your life into your own hands.
Yeah. And well, there's, to be, completely forthright, there was a piece of rock climbing that most of my hobbies are that way. I fought in martial arts for years. I raced motorcycles, and I like to mountain climb. So, and the same thing stands true with all of them. You're present, and you have to be. When you're doing 180 miles an hour on a motorcycle, you have to be present or you die. When you're in a fight with another human being, you have to be present or you get hurt. And the same thing on a mountain. So I like those things because it did constrict everything else. It shuts off the narrative, as I mentioned earlier, and it puts you in that presence. And that's everything you've ever studied. Everything that I've ever studied with spirituality, theology, philosophy, it all really talks to one thing, which is being present. And that's it. You can, even with what we're doing now with COVID, you have to wash your hands for 20 seconds. Most people, when they wash their hands, myself included, most of the time, is you're washing your hands to get to the end. But if you realize, like, oh wow, it's warm water, and I'm actually putting soap on, and I'm watching, and I'm feeling the energy in my body, and I'm actually present in that 20-second moment, it does, for that 20 seconds, shut off the voice that we all have in our head, that I need to do this, and I need to get to this meeting, and I need to close this deal, and I need to go pick up my kids. It's that chattery.
Yeah, exactly. It's the chattery shh.
Yeah,
that's the sound. That's onomatopoeia. It's the sound of the water. Joey, very briefly, two more things that I just wanted you to comment on. You said American culture has very little patience with those suffering from depression. Talk a little bit about that, and is that still the case now with people that are really, really struggling right now?
I think it's getting better. I think that mental health as a whole has not been addressed. If you look at the debates as an example, and this isn't getting political, no matter who it is, no one's talking about mental health at scale. So when you look at all the coming stuff with COVID, one of it is going to be mental health for a lot of people. How are they handling the anxiety and the depression that they're doing right now? And do they have anybody to talk to? And when I started suffering, I read about it, and I went to the library at the time because I didn't have enough access. There was no internet. There was, but it was small. I read that it was something where you could be looked at as kind of a scourge on society, or weak, or you have some lack of character, or there's something wrong with you, and it scares people. And you mentioned before, if you start getting into some really heavy conversations, you can see people kind of physically move away. They can just, oh, hey, I didn't really want to go there. And if you tell someone I'm depressed, or I'm feeling depressed at this moment, that's not necessarily a good thing. And if an employer finds out, or a girlfriend, or there's a lot of things that I did not want. I didn't even come out and talk about depression until 20 years later. I'm now talking about it because I can.
It seems like what we need to do is we need to rebrand. We're marketers. We need to rebrand depression and recognize that, in fact, it isn't a sign of weakness. That's still this. Exactly. One more thing, Joey, which is we have to discuss this idea of what it is, in fact, not just to be a man, but more importantly, what does it mean to be an evolved man? You said being teacher of the year is nice. We talk about essential services, but at the end of the day, when we all get back into the swing of things, are we going to forget the teachers? We're going to forget the RNs. We're going to forget the grocery clerks. And you said it's not how you win in America. In America, a man is required to distinguish himself in some capacity, such as military heroism, athletic competition, sexual conquest, and academic and professional achievement. As a dramatic reading for you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, that was part of the narrative around what are we if we're not those things, right? There was a wonderful book written by a young woman named Liz Plank. It was called For the Love of Men. And when I read it, I was like, wow, she did an amazing amount of research, both domestically and internationally. She talked to men, and she did so because she was trying to understand the Me Too movement. Why are men such douchebags? My word. But she actually came out of this research feeling sorry for us because she didn't understand how connected we were to these social constructs around malehood, around masculinity, around being macho. And if you're not one of those things, who are you? And then she went into a very cool analysis of what she called incels, which are young men who are involuntarily celibate. And bigger than the celibacy is that they do not have interaction with females. And they're young, and they want young women to look at them, or they want to have a girlfriend, and they want to have some level of intimacy, whether even if it's just emotional, and they're not getting it. And so how do they react? Anger, insecurity, fear, all of these things that come out of that. And for me, my son's third grade teacher, he's in second grade, but his school is a young man named Mr. Lee, who is an incredible teacher, and he won Teacher of the Year last year. And I was like, wow, that is so amazing. He's such a wonderful man, but we don't hear about Mr. Lee, right? We hear about, Elon Musk, and we hear about, Steve Jobs at the time. And we hear about all these business captains of industry. And these are the men that are creating jobs. And these are the people that are, we look up to in our society. And when I fell off my perch numerous times in the business world, I was immediately vulnerable and insecure. And I didn't know who I was anymore. And even when I left my career to be a stay-at-home dad and help my executive wife and take my boys to school and coach and all of those wonderful things, I had a hard time for the first year of even telling people that I was a stay-at-home dad. And then once I said it out loud, it was like, oh man, that was liberating. And now it's the first thing I say. It's the first thing I have on my website is I'm a stay-at-home dad, and I'm very proud of it. But it took me a while because I didn't see it as masculine, and I didn't see it as the way I grew up in Minnesota, which was men work, they provide for their families, even if it's 2 jobs, weekends, doesn't matter, go get it. And my mom even was like, what are you doing writing this book? Isn't Debbie working too much? And I said, yeah, yes, Debbie is working too much, but well, you should probably get back to work. And I was like, I know, Mom, I love you, but we're okay financially. So I'm just trying to get this done. And it is not just the voice in my head. I have my mommy's voice in my head about getting to work because that's how I was brought up.
Well, right now we're going to help Joey with continued therapy in the.
Well, I had plenty of that too.
The book is called Dirty Words: The Diary of a Recovering Douchebag. And if you want to find out more about Joey, and if you want to actually be able to give him an email address, because it's still pretty early in the process, all you got to do is visit this website, which is dirtywords.media, and find out more. Joey, I just wanted to leave you with one thought, which is, I know this having written 5 books. You pour your life into a book, and you work your ass off for that book. And I always say, people say publishing a book is like birthing a child, which of course we wouldn't know,
No.
but we have an idea. The work only begins when you submit the manuscript. And then someone buys the book for $13 or $18 on Amazon, and they give it 1 star or 2 stars.
Or the finger, yeah.
For whatever reason. And that's almost like insulting you to your core. But on the flip side, I don't ever get 1 star, but it's just hypothetical. But I think the idea is a book sometimes isn't, it's not just the $13 or the $20. It's worth $20,000 when it comes to the insights. And I think you've given us years of your life, decades of your life, a lot of pain. You've shared that. You've demonstrated that vulnerability. And people that do buy the book will be privileged and fortunate enough to learn from you. Jan said he's going to buy 24 for his douchebag friends for holiday gifts. He has it. I don't think he's bought a single one of them. I'm just kidding, Jan. I'm just teasing you. It's not about you, Joseph. It's about Joey. It's not about you, Joe. It's about Joe. Joey, thank you for coming in. And
Thank you, sir.
And I really do appreciate it. And by the way, if you want more of Joey Dumont and more of Joseph Jaffe, well, first of all, I'm here every day except for Saturdays, but Joey is with me almost every day in the Zoom room. He's awesome. You're awesome. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.